Hey everyone, Dr. David here with Brain and Body Foundation, and welcome. I'm going to be going through for the next few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, we'll be talking about what we term the great secret of life, specifically talking about how the gut affects the brain and how the brain affects the gut. And I have to tell you this, guys, it's pretty much new to me. The kind of things, the degree to which the brain and the gut interact, and how so many diseases and even our normal day lives are influenced by the gut and by that interaction between the gut and the brain. It's really amazing to me and shocking. And so we're going to go through a few things. Feel free to leave your comments, questions. And we're still experimenting with these tools. So please let us know how we're doing. If you have any suggestions for improvement, please send them in. So back to the great secret of life. And how this all started in my case was when I was writing my first book. Still my only book, but I say my first book because by faith I'm going to be writing a lot more. When I was writing my first book, Dr. Murray, I asked Dr. Murray, who is the editor of Harper's Biochemistry. He's in his mid-80s now, but has been a very good friend of mine. And yeah, I know I'm shamelessly dropping names, but just bear with me here, okay? I asked him to send in a contribution for the book, and the quote that he sent was one by Sidney Smith, a Scottish philosopher, and he said this: "I am convinced that good or proper digestion is the great secret of life." I'm convinced that good digestion is the great secret of life. Now, he said this in the 1800s, and so it could have just been the ramblings of a philosopher, someone who just has his head in the sky all the time. But why did Dr. Murray send that to me? Dr. Murray is a professor of biochemistry. He's trained several PhD students after him. He is probably one of the most renowned in his field. And why would a scientist be quoting a Scottish philosopher? Why? And so I politely accepted the quote and I put it in my book and just went on with life. But some more clues and thoughts small clues to this interaction as I come my way. Many of you know I did a lot of webinars in the past, and we did something on the brain and Alzheimer's disease. And one of the participants said there was one time when her father had severe Alzheimer's disease. He's since passed away or passed on, but there was a period in time when they did an enema for him. What do you call it now? Colonic. They kind of like flushed his insides. They flushed his colon and got all that gunk out. And they said that for about 2 weeks afterwards, he was lucid. It was crystal clear. He was speaking well. It wasn't as if he never had the disease. And then after that 2 weeks, he reverted and was back to his problematic self. So things like that got me thinking. And then when I came back to Nigeria, we started dealing with children with brain disorders, and we saw how connected the two were, the brain and the gut, that is. There was one particular case of a child with severe congenital problems. Severe congenital meaning that it started before birth while she was in her mother's womb. She had all the signs. In fact, it was so bad that there wasn't even a name for this condition. She was born in the US, but even in the US, they just didn't have a name for it because it was so rare. She couldn't speak well, her behavior was off. She had physical deformities as well, just all over the place, but she couldn't speak. And of course, mentally, she wasn't well developed there as well. And so when we got to see them, we just gave them one supplement, one nutraceutical, and that nutraceutical was primarily for the gut, to help heal the gut, help improve the gut. And I just gave it to them as a starting point because I was like, well, let's see what this does. And shock of shocks, within a few weeks to a month, the mother comes back and she's like, wow, her behavior has improved. Suddenly the child is smiling and dancing. Suddenly she's paying attention to the TV, paying attention to her siblings. It's almost as if she woke up from a dream. And she was now beginning to get engaged and interact with the environment. And that happened with just one nutraceutical specifically for the gut. So that got me thinking a lot. And I was like, well, let's see what's going on here. And like I said, with the kids, well, we kept on having kids with different kind of conditions, everything from autism to cerebral palsy to Down syndrome to other genetic problems. We kept on seeing these conditions improve simply by improving the gut. And almost in every situation, I'm quickly step in here, almost in every case, children had constipation. Almost in every case, children had constipation. So it was almost as if the brain not functioning well translated to the gut not functioning well. So the question is, why? Why this connection between the two so much? And so I began to look at it, and there are about 4 or 5 different reasons why the brain and the gut are so intimate. One of them is, of course, the immune system. You probably heard about the immune system. 70 to 80% of all immune cells reside in the gut. 70 to 80%. Now, I never knew that in medical school. Throughout my medical practice, I never knew that. We had to learn this outside of the regular practice of medicine. That's what I had to. I don't know about you if you're a doctor. So, what does that mean? It means that a lot of influence, how important the importance of the gut, the immune system really raises that importance in your mind, doesn't it? Because everything from inflammation to how the cells communicate with themselves, how problems are discovered in the body is primarily through the immune system. So if the gut is the starting point, then if there's any problem anywhere in your body, whether it's in the bones, in the joints, in the arteries, in the veins, in the vessels, anywhere, if the immune system isn't working like it should, you're most likely not going to catch it, or your body isn't going to catch it, and there's a danger or the risk that it's going to fester and going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. You've probably heard this before. About 40% of all cancers is related to your diet, or it begins in the gut. Because again, for that reason, the immune system is what protects you against cancer. And if your immune system, if 70%, 80% of your immune system is in the gut, then there's a danger that if your gut isn't healthy, your immune system will not be healthy as well. That's one. We also know that neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, in fact, this was a shock to me, 95% of serotonin is created and used in the gut, not in the brain, but in the gut. Now think about this. The number one drugs they use worldwide for antidepression or for depression are drugs that are meant to manipulate and influence the production and uptake of serotonin, all because depression, as they say, that they found out that a lot of depression is as a result of diminished amounts of serotonin. So these drugs are meant to increase the levels of serotonin, but their full focus is on the brain. Now we're finding out that a lot of these drugs inadvertently work on the gut as well, because most of the serotonin is used in the gut. And so that's why people who are on antidepressants tend to have stomach issues, gut issues as well, because this is affecting both sides. So that's another thing that's important. Dopamine, I mentioned. Dopamine is the high hormone, HIGH. Is what helps to give you a nice, good feeling in the body. Nice, what helps you, gives you drive, gives you happiness, gives you the feeling of, anticipation. You're going towards something. A quick side point: drugs, illicit drugs like cocaine. Well, the way they act is to improve or to increase dopamine levels in the body. A natural way to increase dopamine too is by sex or having a great orgasm. Some of the highest levels of dopamine are produced in the body after an orgasm, and that's why sex is such a great thing, because it gives you such a high. Well, drug can even give you a bigger high, but of course you can't do drugs. Don't do drugs. So that's two. So we talked about immune system, neurotransmitters. The gut has some say, well, not half, but a large number of neurons. I think the number is about 500 million. It's the second highest number of neurons in the body next to the brain. So in fact, it's called the second brain. Another reason why the brain and the gut, why the gut is so important to brain function and so important to the body, is because the obvious reason is the portal of entry. It's through your mouth that you take in all kinds of food and drinks and other things as well. I mean, a lot of toxins come with it, heavy metals to come with it. So your gut has to be primed and ready to sift through the good stuff, remove the bad stuff and keep the good stuff in. If the gut, for any reason, is not able to protect and to guard and create a good enough barrier against the bad stuff getting into the bloodstream, then we have a problem, and this is going to affect the brain function, affect mood problems and all that. A quick example: mercury and lead are in all kinds of things, in our foods, in our drinks, and all, in our water and all that. We know that lead poisoning and mercury poisoning can actually cause defects in brain function. They can reduce your IQ. They can even affect your ability to speak, especially in young kids. We know many kids with autism, if they have mercury, I believe it's mercury yet, high levels of mercury can actually shut down the speech centers. So the gut, back to the gut now, the gut helps to protect gut against these toxins entering into the system. If the gut isn't strong enough, if the barrier isn't well formed, then these things will be able to seep into the system. A third thing is that did I say third? I mean fourth, fifth, I don't know who's counting. The other thing is that it's in the guts that the key enzymes are made to absorb and digest and even create certain hormones. I think vitamin B12, there's a factor called an intrinsic factor, without which your body cannot make use of vitamin B12. Intrinsic factor helps the body make use of vitamin B12. So it's really, really important that your gut is well maintained. And I gotta say this, folks, most of us are pretty sloppy when it comes to taking care of the gut, improving gut function. Many of us are very careless. Especially, in your teens, your early 20s, late 20s, not beyond 30, you can afford to be careless. But some of those things will eventually catch up with you. But from the age of 30 onwards, things are plateauing. Your natural abilities, your natural strengths will begin to wane. So your natural forces will begin to wane. So it's very important that as soon as possible, you are aware of these. The things that can hurt your gut, the things that can hurt your brain, because whatever hurts your gut hurts your brain. Just take it like that. So it's very important that we become educated on what these things are and what to do. More importantly, what to do to improve gut function. So I have a few tips for you. There are about 4 things: 2 do's, 2 don'ts. 2 do's, 2 don'ts. Makes it very easy for you. The first do is make sure you take good foods. And I know that's kind of like vague. I forgot this, but I was supposed to bring a bottle. Hey, could you ever get there's something called fiber on this table here, like a fiber colon cleanse. So what I do, fiber is really, really important. Thank you. I'm going to show this to you in a minute. Fiber is really, really important for a healthy gut, because what fiber does is that it helps to clean up the gut, but it also helps to move things along. It also helps to slow down the absorption of things like sugar and cholesterol. But more important than the things I've just mentioned is that fiber helps to feed the good bacteria. If we have good bacteria, we have bad bacteria. It should be 85% good to 15% bad. When this ratio becomes affected, especially in the negative sense, it can really result in some really bad things happening. So good bacteria, very, very important. Fiber helps to feed a good bacteria, and most of the fiber you can get are in fruits and vegetables. Not much in meats, not much in fish. Fiber is found in fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, over here in Nigeria, we don't take too much of fruits and vegetables. It's really hard to even find us doing that. Salads are a delicacy over here, unfortunately. Some of it, it's got to be well prepared, and anyway, it's a long story. So what I do is that I have this really good thing, and listen, I don't own any shares in this company or anything, but just this is what I take. It's called Colon Cleanse. The recommendation is you take about 30 grams a day of fiber. In fact, I think it's 40 now, 40 grams of fiber. A heaped tablespoon of this will give you about 7 grams. So you're supposed to take it multiple times. I don't come anywhere close to 4 times a day, but I do try and take it as regularly as I can. And I tell you, whenever I take it, I feel really good because it helps to really get things out and helps to cleanse the system. The number 2 is that you need to take, when I write this down now, number 2 is that you, two don'ts. You want to eat healthy foods. So take vegetables and fruits. It should come to me in a minute. But the 2 don'ts. First don't, you want to reduce your intake of the things that are obviously not healthy. And you've heard this before. One is you don't want to take the three whites. You want to avoid sugar. You want to avoid bread. You want to avoid white rice. All these 3 are very, they're not very healthy for the system. So you want to avoid them as much as possible. Also, you want to avoid things that are toxic to the body. Things like alcohol, smoking, obviously illicit drugs. You want to avoid illicit drugs as much as possible. So you want to reduce those as much as possible because these affect the lining of the gut. So there are a few distractions going on back there. We need to watch out for that in the future. It affects the lining of the gut and fried foods too. Let's not forget, we want to avoid fried foods. The lining of the gut is very, very important as a barrier between the outside world and the bloodstream. So the gut has to be as healthy as possible. The integrity of the gut, that gut lining has to be maintained as much as possible. We know this, that fried foods, because of the oil, the fried oils can be toxic to the system. We know also that the 3 whites, again, because they raise a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of simple sugars. They put a lot of simple sugars and dump it in your system, and this can be a focal point for bad bacteria to feed on and to produce toxic substances. So it's really important that you have a really good amount of healthy foods. You want to take fiber. You want to take as many fruits and vegetables as possible. You want to stay more with cooked and raw foods as opposed to the fried and processed foods. Avoid putting stuff in the microwave as much as you possibly can. I know that's hard, but avoid it as much as possible. Eat fresh foods as much as possible. So those are our suggestions, our corrections. We do a lot at the Brain and Body Foundation with regards to children with brain disorders, like I said, and the key part of what we do is to cleanse and heal the guts. There are nutraceuticals now that we found out that work wonders. I mentioned one of them. It works wonders when it comes to helping the brain function. And I think this is something that you need to talk to your healthcare providers as well, especially if you have a child with a brain disorder or a brain condition. If they're not focusing, or if they're not, as part of their treatment and regimen, if they're not focused on healing and cleaning the gut and strengthening the guts, I gotta tell you, they're fighting with one arm behind their back, blindfolded, and probably with their 2 legs chopped off, because that's key. It's fundamental to everything that has to do with brain function, to mood, behavior, even to skin disorders. I forgot to mention this. But we know that people who have constant allergies, who have dermatitis, people who, acne, all these things have a lot to do with what's going on in the gut. And again, it's a lot of immune system interactions that are out of whack. So it's really important that you just think through this. Find out, investigate for yourself, try and discuss with your healthcare provider and see if they can include, whatever else they're doing, they can include healing and strengthening of the gut. And you'll be glad you did. But it takes some investigation, it takes some search, but you'll be glad you did. So I want to encourage you to think about the gut, and I want to leave you with this thought: build gut strength. And that's our tagline for the month: build gut strength. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time, and please don't forget to send in your corrections, your comments, your suggestions, things like that. Looking forward to seeing you on the next video, next webinar. Thanks. Bye.